And please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Beauchamp. Here. Elliott.
Here.
Goodloe. Here. Lowquist.
Here.
David Miller.
Here.
And Wynn.
And for the record, Monica Miller previously asked for an excused absence. There are no proclamations or awards or recognitions this evening, so we will move to the approval of the agenda.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Two will
Aye.
vote. Motion carries. The consent agenda is before you.
Approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. So there are no petitions, protested communications, so we are at citizen comment on non-agenda issues. This is a time where you have 3 minutes to speak to an issue that is not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone signed up? And Terry is on. I don't know how he is on the screen and so Dan, this is for items that are not on the council's agenda tonight. You have,
No, I was to speak for the annexation. I'm sorry.
I think I heard he's speaking to something on the agenda. Okay. Well, hold your thought and we'll get to you later. Which is up next. So was anyone else in the room here to speak on something not on tonight's agenda? Okay. So next is business requiring public hearings, and item 8A. I read a script for these. So the purpose of this legislative hearing is for the city council to consider approval of an annexation and first reading of ordinance 4909 for annexation of parcels 7444134, 474134, 513634, and 503634, located at 1900 Brick Road, P 22-085, filed by the International Order of Odd Fellows Lodge 20. The public hearing is now open. I ask for your cooperation in the following procedure. Everyone will be given an opportunity to be heard. The city clerk will be making a recording of the proceedings. I will first recognize requests to testify from anyone attending this hearing in person, followed by any persons attending remotely via Zoom. If you wish to participate virtually via Zoom, you must raise your virtual hand on the Zoom meeting screen or press *9 if you're connected by telephone only, and wait until I have recognized your request and you have been unmuted. When you're invited to speak, please begin by stating your name and address and indicate whether you are speaking for yourself individually or as a spokesperson for a certain group or both. Speak slowly and clearly. Only one person will be allowed to speak at a time. Any requests of staff are to be directed through the council. So before we hear from the audience, is there a staff report to be presented?
I do have one. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. This is Jamie Ailing with the Community Development Department. And as mentioned, what you do have before you tonight is an annexation request by the International Order of Odd Fellows for the 4 parcels that are approximately 36 acres in size located at 1900 Brick Road. As you may recall, a notice of intention to initiate this process was brought before council and heard by this council on September 6th of 2022. The planning commission then, after that was recommended to forward on in the process, the planning commission held a public hearing on November 10th of 2022 to consider the petition for annexation. There were multiple public comments made at that hearing concerning traffic on Fenning, potential density issues, what would be built on the property, and other issues. In all, you had 26 members of the public sign in on the sign-in sheets. And not all of those members spoke. However, there were others present that didn't sign in as well. It was a full room in these chambers. The planning commission heard a report from staff, that being me, which recommended approval of the annexation and assignment of residential low zoning. The applicant's representative, Mr. Sturgill, also provided testimony at the hearing that included the fact that there was an error made with the original application and requesting RL when it should have actually requested residential medium zoning. I'm going to share a couple of screens. These are exhibits in your packet as well. What I wanted to bring up is this was brought up at the planning commission hearing as well. And what I provided, this is kind of small, but what I did is brought up table 15.310040, our permitted use table, and wanted to point out the differences between the RL and the RM zoning, what's permitted. Basically, these zones are identical in what they allow as far as residential uses. Single families are both permitted. Cottages are both permitted. Duplexes, both permitted. Townhouses, on and on and on. Run down the comparisons. There's a difference in boarding houses, which are not part of the proposal. But we do need to consider that when we do annex, that any of these potentially could be on there. So this is one of your main discrepancies, a conditional use for a boarding house versus a permitted use. And then community residential facilities or senior citizen assisted living facility would be permitted in RM, but not in the RL. So those are your main differences. And then I also went on at the planning commission hearing to bring up the difference. The other major difference comes in table 15.320.030. And that concerns our configurations and our densities. And what the major difference is here in the RL, the minimum density is 6 dwelling units per acre versus RM being 8 dwelling units per acre for minimums, but our maximums is in the RL is 8 dwelling units per acre. Whereas the RM, there's no limit. Other than that, your heights of buildings are the same, your setbacks are all the same for those. So that's the major discrepancy. So I went through that with the planning commission. I also felt it important to point out to council in considering this. Ultimately, after going through the hearing and this, planning commission made a motion that passed in 4-1. One member opposed, 4 members approving that council, a recommendation to council to approve the annexation and assign a residential medium zone. So notice of this particular hearing was provided by mail to property owners within 300 feet. We also mailed it to all parties of record that were part of the public hearing at Planning Commission. We published notice in the Daily Record, and the property was posted. Another exhibit that I want to bring your attention to is exhibit 2 of this particular. It shows the property, but it's the zoning map in the packet. And what I kind of want to point out is to support staff's position on this. We have the green zoning, the property is highlighted in red. And then on the south end, the green zoning designation is your residential suburban, and the yellow is the residential low. There is some residential medium over on Brook Lane, However, nothing adjacent to this particular spot. It would not be considered a spot zone because it's a large enough piece if it were to go RM, but looking at densities of surrounding neighborhoods, the existing zoning of those, and the potential to develop future further to the east with constraints. Staff is going to differ from the Planning Commission's recommendation in this particular instance and will recommend that council adopt ordinance 4909, approving the annexation, but we would recommend the RL, residential low zoning, as opposed to RM as suggested by the Planning Commission. So within your packet is the Planning Commission's recommendation and the reading of ordinance 4909, which is set out with an RM as it matches the Planning Commission's recommendation. However, I just wanted to point out staff's position on this particular one. And with that, I can stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Does the applicant's representative have any testimony they would like to present at this time? Yes, sir.
Good evening, David Sturgill, authorized representative for Oddfellows Lodge number 20, Ellensburg. I'll begin by repeating some of the things I told the Planning Commission. This parcel is home to the Oddfellows Cemetery, the oldest cemetery in the city, in the county. It's been operating continuously for 142 years. There are 12,500 souls interred there. It's the cemetery of record for nearly every part of the county. We are asking for annexation into the city to support continued operations for the cemetery. This is a financial decision. Our cemetery operates on all volunteer labor with the exception of 3 part-time paid positions. Even with all volunteer labor, it costs approximately $250,000 a year to operate the cemetery, which teeters on the edge of bankruptcy nearly every month. We must develop this land in order to continue to operate the cemetery, we hope, for another 142 years. We understand that the neighborhood has grown up around the cemetery, and we are not absentee landlords. We're not developers from the west side. We won't build a bunch of shoddy homes and then go back home to Bellingham with our millions of dollars. We're neighbors. We are going to be here. We are unable to sell the land ever. We will always control this land. The legal structure of the Oddfellows Grand Lodge prohibits us from selling the land. So we must carefully steward this obligation that we have, not only to the future, but also to the past for 142 years and 12,500 souls buried there. We don't know exactly what we're going to do with the land. All we're asking for is annexation. Annexation gives us more flexibility. The area is part of the urban growth area, part of the urban growth zone designated to be annexed at some point in the next decade. And we feel that it gives us more flexibility. The initial request was for residential low. However, after we read this council's Ellensburg Housing Action Plan, all 139 pages of it, we realized that residential medium would give us more flexibility. What that flexibility is, we don't know. We don't have a master plan. We've spoken with a few developers informally. We've spoken with a few architects on a pro bono basis. Recognizing the Ellensburg Housing Action Plan stipulates that there is a severe housing shortage, we may put housing on that property if we're able to, because that would also generate an income that would allow the cemetery to operate on a more stable financial basis. I'm happy to answer any questions. from the council or from anyone else.
Thank you. But we have to follow the script, which doesn't allow for questions right now. Right now, the floor is open to testimony from the public. Each person will have an opportunity to address the council for an initial period not to exceed 5 minutes. If more time is needed, it will be made available after everyone has had an opportunity to speak. Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak to this issue? You all came for reasons. Mr. Watson. How are you?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. For the record, my name is Jeff Watson. I live at 903 East 8th Avenue in Ellensburg. Also, for the record, it is the Independent Order of Odd Fellows, not the International Order of Odd Fellows, for future paperwork. My great-great-grandfather, my great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my father are all buried in that cemetery, and there are plots waiting for myself and my son. That cemetery has been intricately and undeniably tied to this valley for all of its inhabitants for generations. For 142 years, the Odd Fellows have kept watch, making it accessible and affordable to all. But the reality is its existence is in jeopardy. With the exception of the part-time administrative and part-time burial specialist, it is run and maintained by an all-volunteer force, most of us over 60, and some of us far beyond that. Over 12,000 souls tended by a bunch of old men who keep it green, keep it mowed, keep it trimmed, and keep it running. Cemeteries are going broke all over the country. When faced with the extensive cost of whole body burials versus cremation, most families are opting for the latter and spreading their loved ones' ashes over their favorite lake, stream, or mountainside. The sole purpose of this proposal is to ensure that there's an ongoing income to subsidize the drop in revenue that has occurred over the course of the last couple of decades. To hire a paid full-time set of professionals to maintain both the cemetery and the development, whatever form that may take. For 140 years, we've been good neighbors, and we intend to keep it that way, but 8 units per acre for the entire development is going to be too cost prohibitive to meet our goals. This is just the first step. Nothing has been decided with respect to the nature of the final development, but initial discussions are to place single-family housing to the south with a buffered green space between ours and the existing development. Then put undetermined higher density apartments, townhouses, cottage housing, clustered housing, or micro apartments to the north end of the 2 developable lots. This community needs affordable housing. There are and are going to be plenty of $350,000 to $500,000 homes built in the coming months and years. Affordable housing for people that need it is in keeping with the tenets of Oddfellowdom. Housing for veterans, the disabled, the elderly, and students are the intended focus for this development. No lots are intended for sale to any entity or any person. The fact is that Lodge 20 does not have the authority to sell this property. Your comprehensive plan has included this property in the urban growth area, labeled it residential neighborhood, and described that designation as one that, quote, supports a range of residential zones with housing densities that help to achieve the city's housing diversity and affordable goals. The annexation and zoning classification to RM is logical, desirable, affordable, and legal. That cemetery and the lodge that supports it has existed since before statehood. It is our history. Please give it a chance to be our legacy. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the issue? Seeing no one, is there anyone online? Mr. Terry, was this the issue you wanted to speak to? Yeah, his hand is raised. Can you unmute?
Yes, I'd like to speak.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this proposed P22-085 annexation petition. I raise no objections to annexation, but of more of the type of rezoning. So far, everything proposed outside the current RS zone is out of the character for this surrounding area. Again, the nearest high density zone is RM, and this is a geographically separated by proposed annexation by a dramatic elevation change and is associated with CWU. I agree everyone should be given the opportunity to make a profit and a living off of their land and their property. I don't agree with the rezoning to something completely out of character for this area. If anything, I would ask that they are annexed with the same RS designation consistent with the current adjacent zoning and rural nature of the surrounding area to the north and to the east. I live in the north of that area, which will put what they're calling possibly the large apartments and higher density, which is choked down at the bottleneck of Finning and Game Farm and Brick. It's already a pretty nasty area. Racing and traffic. My neighbors had their land ran into 3 times, people going through the stop signs. We're a single family, half acre or so and up parcels of land. We already see high crime and traffic and irrigation runoff problems. If what is being proposed at this property is allowed to go forward, we will only see more traffic and crime and irrigation runoff problems, along with lower single family home values because of non-ownership that will come with a high density build. As one of you stated in the previous annexation meeting, get used to it, call the police. Well, if I had bought into a bad area, that's my choice, but I didn't, and I shouldn't have. Hope Source or someone else bring in this kind of a problem. I shouldn't have to live in fear that my wife and children, grandchildren, and neighbors may be victims of some kind of violence brought on by the drugs and transients, mentally ill, sex offenders, etc. And then call the police. I don't know if many of you have tried to call the police or anything lately, but it doesn't work very well. But anyway, I just would ask that we rezone it and keep it consistent with the area. Again, I do want people to make a living and make a profit, but don't bring bad things into our neighborhood. All right, thank you.
Thank you. So again, anyone in the room? I'm going to go with this lady here.
Hi, my name is Ren. I would like to introduce myself as somebody representing those of us who do live in quality affordable housing as of this time. I consider myself a respectable member of this community. It's very disheartening to hear otherwise by other members of the community. Less than a year ago, my own daughter stood in this very room saying the Pledge of Allegiance to most of you people. We are active in the community, volunteerism. My children make good grades. There are no police issues. We need and deserve affordable housing. But if we can't afford the size we need, the bedrooms we need, we might as well move. This sort of program can help those of us, especially those of us who are paying top tier out of affordable housing, those of us that do contribute to society and want to do better with our lives. We deserve this. So I don't want the council thinking that every person that is in affordable housing is a problem. It's very disheartening to hear these words. Thank you.
And I should have asked everyone when you approach the microphone to please introduce yourself and your address. Mr. Nikolai.
Hello, Madam Mayor and members of the council. My name is Scott Nikolai. I am member of the Independent Order of Odd Fellows. I live at 510 North Mount Stewart Avenue. Dave and Jeff did an excellent job, in my opinion, of describing why we really are seeking the residential medium zoning. The thing I want to underscore is we are very unique in terms of developing land. We own this 10.4 acres. We've owned it for a long time. When we endeavored to start developing this land, we wanted to make sure we met three objectives. We wanted to be environmentally sustainable. That's very important to me. We want it to be economically viable. In other words, support the cemetery for the next 140 years. And we want it to be something that's really fosters a strong community here in our wonderful town that I'm frankly very proud of. The reason I'm involved in the Odd Fellows is because the motto is friendship, love, and truth. To me, love means protect from harm. And when I look at the world today, I think we've got a lot of work to do. We need vibrant communities, mixed income levels. And I'm excited, frankly, with this project. But we really need the RM zoning in order to maintain that flexibility. Because we are a unique landowner, what I will be pushing strongly for is a transition on that land from lower density proximate to the adjacent parcels to the south and a little bit to the west, and higher density on the north on that parcel. We do not need to make top dollar for that land. And we want it to be something that we're all proud of as our community continues to grow. I want to see trails. I'd love to see a perimeter trail. I was out there planting trees one day after work, and I was amazed at how many people walked past me after 5 o'clock, heading north on Fenning, where there's no sidewalk right now, and then onto the cemetery land, which is great. We think that's cool that people want to walk through that land. I would like to see a trail around this 10.4 acres. I would like to see edible landscaping along that. I want to see a greenscape along that irrigation canal. I'm a habitat biologist and I've worked in that field for 30 years. And my wife and I have done that on our piece of a irrigation ditch / creek. And we're really proud of that green space. That helps to undo this thing called nature deficit disorder, right? Where kids don't know what is growing outside their window. We want to have that there. So I just want to emphasize, we're about friendship, love, and truth. And please give us the RM zone. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir.
Yes, my name is Dave Christofferson. I live at 1709 East Gala Way. We're in the Canterbury area, just south of the proposed annexation. I was at the meeting, the development meeting, and I spoke that I would prefer it to stay in a residential law. The area that I live is RS, which is suburban. It's a little bit more restrictive. I have no problems with development of that property or whatever, but we bought that property because we love the area. We love the single family dwelling area. I have no problems with duplexes or something going into that area, but I think it should stay the same or in the same configuration as the surrounding area to the south. I love the area. That's why I bought there. What it really boils down to, it's boiling down that my neighborhood is in a fight against a company that needs money. So it really comes down to money is what we're talking about here. And I bought that property because I loved it. I wanted to stay in the area. I grew up in this town, moved back 3 years ago for one reason, to be a part of Ellensburg. I don't feel, I have relatives in the cemetery. also. I'm not wanting them not to make it. I would hope they make it, but I don't feel that our neighborhood should sacrifice for that. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room who'd like to speak to this issue? Is there anyone else online who would like to speak? Please raise your hand. Mr. Corby Jorgensen Haley. We unmute.
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello?
Go ahead.
Hi, thanks. It's just to, for transparency, it's Mrs. Corby Jorgensen Haley.
right.
I live at 630 Fairview Road. I do work in the affordable housing development area, but I am here on my own behalf, and I want to speak in support of the annexation and of zoning with a medium density. I just want to point out that there's been some kind of really stereotypical negative stereotypes about what affordable housing is, who lives in it, what the impact is to the neighborhood and the community. And from one particular speaker, everything I heard was false. It is fear mongering. It is not what happens. The data does not support any of those concerns. To the people who live in the housing, particularly the newer subdivisions next to this housing, the arguments you are making against this development is the same arguments that the people who lived closer to you before your housing was built made about your housing. Nobody wants anything built in their backyard ever. That's kind of how it goes. You know, but we are a growing, thriving community, and we need to ensure that we have housing choices that are suitable for all of our community members. And that's what we're talking about here. People who live in this community and the Oddfellows, who is a long-standing member of this community, and their organizational needs. I don't think when you're talking about survival that you are talking about profit. They are talking about maintaining their needs. And I just wanted to speak in support of that. I am also on the advisory committee for HB 1220, which I'm sure your planning staff will be familiar with. And one of the things that you're going to be required to do jurisdictionally, this is an amendment to the Growth Management Act, is ensuring that you are making adequate provisions for all housing types and doing a certain land inventory and buildable lands analysis. So coming in at a lower zoning is erroneous. Coming in at a higher zoning is going to benefit the city in the long run, because you'll have to show that you are allowing for all types of housing developments, and they are determining affordability based on the types of housing that can be built there, primarily the density. So that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Last chance, anyone in the room? Last chance online. Okay, seeing no one. Does the staff have anything to add?
Madam Mayor, Dan Terry raised his hand right as you said there were no more.
He spoke once and had his 5 minutes, so I'm gonna move on. So, go ahead.
Staff has nothing further to add. at this
Okay,
point.
thank you. Does the applicant or any persons in the audience want to add any non-repetitive information about evidence in this matter? Okay, I guess we'll take Dan Terry now. If Drew, do you want to unmute Dan Terry? And then, so this is non-repetitive information, Mr. Terry.
Yes, I just would like to make clear, I guess, is from what I'm understanding from the Oddfellows is this is going to be owned by them forever. So they're going to be basically leasing this land out.
If that's a
guess they're part-
question, the council can ask that question of the applicant in a minute.
But I mean, we're sprawling out, urban is sprawling out into the suburbs and the rural areas. But I mean, if this is leased land, nobody will ever own it. I don't know what the city council is going to gain in taxes or revenue. And who's going to own the property, the buildings that are being built on the north end is what I'm mainly concerned with, because it's going to be right across the street from me. I'm at that intersection, so I'm highly concerned with it being a maximum or a high level area because of the traffic and my children and stuff in the yard and animals and things.
Okay, thank you. I think
Okay, thank
we
you.
had that point before. Okay, so council, do you have any questions of the staff, the applicant, or the public?
I have a question for staff. I'm a member of Hope Source's board. I feel like
Member
I
of what?
can-
I'm sorry.
I'm a member on the Hope Source board. I didn't realize this had Hope Source attached to it. But I will recuse myself if I'm supposed to. I can vote on this and Hope Source might not like my vote.
I don't
so.
believe there's no specific proposal. I think applicants represented that before, so I think the answer is you do not have to.
I have a question for Mr. Sturgis. How many acres of your 10 does the cemetery take?
Please come to the microphone.
David Sturgill again from the cemetery with non-repetitive information and questions. The total size of all lots on the cemetery is a little less than 37 acres. We only see development potential at this time for 10.4 acres, 0.4 of which are already within city limits. I can address Mr. Elliott's question as well, if that's appropriate.
About Hope Source?
Mhm.
Sure.
Hope Source is not involved in any way with this project. There was a suggestion several years ago that Hope Source might develop the land, but those talks never went anywhere. As we've delved more closely into the Oddfellows legal constraints, we will not be able to involve Hope Source or any other organization. And as I've said, the land can never be sold. We will always have stewardship owner over it. Hope Source will not be involved in this project in any way that we foresee. We do not know exactly what we're going to do with the land, but considering the severe housing shortage in Ellensburg and Kittitas County, housing is a strong option.
Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Sturgis. Would you address Mr. Terry's question about leasing the land? You can't sell it. It's sounding kind of like a habitat.
Land trust.
Yeah,
Kind of a
there,
land trust.
we have looked into several, if we do choose to put housing on there, we've looked into several things. Mr. Terry, one of those things we've looked into is called a community land trust. And that is expressly designed. It's a legal structure that's been successfully used all around the country for almost 50 years. It is expressly designed to move people from affordable housing into the retail market at market levels. It allows them, while living on the leased land, yes, it allows them to develop homeowner equity that can be transferred into a conventional loan. Community land trust is something that I am very passionate about, and I will, if we choose to develop housing on the land, I will probably advocate for some sort of community land trust element to that. However, at this time, we're only asking for annexation. We do not have a master plan. We do not have a developer. We do not have an architect.
Thank you very much.
David?
I have a question for staff. for Community Development Director Ailing. So my question, Jamie, is as you indicated in your staff report, where the accumulated acreage for these 4 parcels is about 37 acres. And as Mr. Sturgis mentioned, the area that they're looking at development is about 10.4 acres. I guess my question is, when we go back to the allowable densities, whether it's residential low or residential medium, my understanding is all 4 parcels would be rezoned with the same zone, I assume. So my question is the density calculation created by for each individual parcel within the 4, or is it calculated on the basis of the 37 acres? Because I'm assuming, as has been stated, the 26 or so acres in the middle that is predominantly cemetery will not be developed, at least anytime soon. So it makes me wonder if you had 2/3 of the developable area undeveloped, you could have significantly higher density in the 3 parcels that we're talking about. Am I on the right track there?
We're exactly on track, where if you did just the 8 dwelling units per acre based on 10, you're looking at 80 units. Base it on the whole 36 acres, 288 units. So.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, on the basis of that calculation, I understand there is no plan, there is no site plan or master plan, but based on that, we could potentially accommodate 288 units, housing units, in these 3 parcels that we're talking about, the 2 southern parcels and the northern parcel. Is that correct?
It would prohibit any future development of the further, but yeah, you can consider one large and 287 lots.
So one last question on the 288, you said that was on the basis of 8 dwelling units per acre?
Correct.
Okay, and did I understand correctly that the RM zone has no upper limit? So 8 is the baseline? So it could be significantly higher than 288 in reality.
It could be 400, but
Okay.
it'd all be driven by setbacks and.
Right. And that would, and right of ways and would bring that down, but there's a lot more unknown about the development than there is known right now, I think. Okay, thank you.
So just to verify, so I understood you to say you would look at the
Total
37 total acres, not the 10,
Correct.
when calculating densities.
We saw one development as on those lots. Yes, we consider that. We've done that on multiple occasions.
I had that same question. Any further questions? So Mr. Ailing, I have a couple.
Sure.
So we've heard concerns about traffic. If they proposed 288 or 400, there would be a traffic study and the roads. Can you explain what would happen? How the city would mitigate any traffic impacts that might result from any development that might occur?
Yes, so with development comes automatically, we have development standards, which would require curb gutter sidewalk, half-street improvement for Fanning, if they were to develop that. We would do a traffic study required on that large of a project subdivision to make sure that our level of service standards stay at a high enough level. If they drop below that, then there is other implications, whether it's money towards a traffic signal if it's warranted at Fanning and Benge Highway or something of that nature. If there has to be mitigation too. We don't want to drop below a level of service of C on our roads. So that would be indicated by a traffic study. It'll say what takes into account what type of development, how many vehicle trips per day based on that use. And we can plug it into a model and say, does this slow it down, or is there enough capacity with that road as is? But at a minimum, it'd be curb gutter, sidewalk, streetlights, and half-street improvement for development. And that would potentially, this is fronted on multiple sides. So you've got Fanning, Game Farm, and Brick Road.
that potentially they would all have to be improved by the
Potentially,
developer if they had impact.
Yes.
And then the city has a couple projects in that area already funded.
We
Can-
do.
Can you describe those?
I probably refer back to Public Works. I happen to have another member here that knows those projects probably better than I do. But there is a brick road project. And I don't know where we're at with the Fenning.
I just was curious how far up that went. Does that go adjacent to the cemetery? I think, Josh, you need to come to the microphone. I'm sorry.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of City Council. I'm Josh Mattson with the Public Works Department, Public Works and Utilities. The project you're referring to is a brick road sidewalk improvements project, and that goes from the top of the hill where the sidewalk currently ends and will extend to the trail that goes down to McElroy Park to connect the sidewalk gap. There's an existing sidewalk there at the top of the park on the east side of the road. So it'll be sidewalks on both sides of the road, but that's where it stops. It's at that trail that goes down to the park.
Okay, so there's a little overlap maybe with the cemetery land, but not much.
It's pretty close to that boundary.
And on Fenning, they're Fenning to Radio Road to University.
Correct. So that's a grant we recently received from Transportation Improvement Board is to build sidewalks on both sides of Fenning Road from about 240 feet north of Vantage Highway where the sidewalks stop. We'll be putting in sidewalks on both sides of Fenning Road up to Radio Road.
Okay, thank you. And there's already sidewalks from Radio to Gala,
Correct.
right, or the edge of the property.
Complete on the west side and partial on the east side adjacent to the 14th Avenue.
And if there were to be a development, the Oddfellows would need to develop Fenning sidewalks the length of their property.
On the frontage where they're being developed, correct.
Okay, thank you. And so I guess, Mr. Ailing, there was also concerns, water and other environmental runoff soil issues. Are those mitigated in the development process?
In the development process through SEPA, which would be required for a plat that size, those would be considered, and also potentially critical areas application for the potential wetland on the southeast portion of their property.
Okay, so there are some potential wetlands.
Potentially, yes.
Okay. And could you explain the spot zone issue? You said it was not an issue, but several letter writers asked.
Yeah, there. Spot zoning used to be a major deal when people would say you're taking out one single parcel that doesn't reflect zoning. It doesn't match what's adjacent to it, and trying to put, like, if you were to try to put RH on a 1 acre lot in this corner, it always used to be called out. Our Growth Management Act has dictated that our comprehensive plan layout, what is intended residential neighborhood, covers what this is. So both of those zones, RL, RM, both fit in our comprehensive plan designation. Therefore, it would not be considered. It's consistent with our comp plan, which is consistent with growth management and would not be considered spot zoning.
Thank you. Any further questions? Council? Mr. Miller.
Yeah, sorry, one follow-up question for Mr. Ailing. And I was going back to the comparison of the RL and RM, the permitted uses. And it seemed like most of them were identical. My question is, since the RL and RM permitted uses are similar, what is the highest density type of housing that would typically be allowed within the RM and RL zone? Are we talking duplexes? Are we talking triplexes? Are we talking multiple unit facilities? Because the applicant has indicated that their potential plan could include higher density development at the north end. So I'm just trying to get a sense of what that might be limited by within either of these two zones. Not density per unit or dwelling unit per acre, but type of structures, apartment buildings versus standalone houses versus duplexes, et cetera.
Well, the multifamily would be permitted. There is a footnote in the RL that applies to your apartment buildings, basically stating that you can do number one, it's permitted subject, you potentially could get density bonus incentives. And then footnote 5, multifamily dwelling units shall not be located adjacent to existing single-family dwellings except where such uses were approved on an individual plat. So in this case, if they got RL and came in, they would not be allowed to put a row of apartments on that southern boundary that lines up with the houses that are already existing, because it wasn't part of the plat, but is with an approved plat, they could put a row of houses and then also be allowed to put apartments within that same plat when it's all approved at once, with the fact knowing that that's what's going to go in there. If that helps.
Okay, so just to clarify, the southernmost parcel abuts the areas of existing low density. I think it's RL, maybe combination of RL or RS zoning. So the southern parcel would be limited that way. The second southern parcel, second to the north, would be not necessary. Well, I suppose it would be if the new development were to consist of single family. But I guess where I was going with it is up at the north end, it seems as though the code would allow for a higher level. And when we say multifamily, there really is no limit in terms of the number of units. It's going to be driven by dwelling units per acre again, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I have one more question. You provided the minutes from the planning commission meeting, but I didn't gather from them what that discussion was like in terms of what was the reasoning that the planning commission opted for RM.
That was tough to disseminate through the minutes, so I apologize for that. But basically, the planning commission referred to they're relying on the fact that the uses are similar, and like also was stated, our housing action plan, we're trying to provide densities to prevent sprawl into the county and get the more houses we can build, potentially the more availability, supply and demand. If there's more supply, the cost will go down, so things will be more affordable. So that's kind of in a nutshell, the basis of why they were thinking RM wouldn't be too out of the question. There is some adjacent, it's not next to it, but the Brook Lane RM zoning that exists in the area, although be it an elevation change. Those were some of the discussions that were had during the planning commission and why they ultimately landed with throwing out the RM for discussion and ultimately passed on their motion.
Okay, thank you. There are no further questions from the council. The public testimony portion of this hearing is now closed. Council may now begin its discussion and deliberation of this matter.
It feels like we're talking about two different things. We're talking about annexing a parcel or a series of parcels that very clearly are in the urban growth area and slated to be part of the city. And I completely would support that motion. The second piece, and this is the zoning, concerns me. And without a project in front of me, I'm not in the mode to support a residential medium designation through the annexation ordinance. So I guess from my perspective, and this is something that we could look at, later in the process, that if a project came that was beneficial to the community, that could be, people could look at and say, yay or nay, this looks good. We can always change the zoning later. So I would be inclined to support bringing the parcels in under residential low. I'm not making that motion yet. I'm just talking.
I guess I would respond by saying we don't normally pair an actual project even with a rezone. That we have to rely on that table and what is allowed to project that's what might be possible. And yeah, I think we need to decide yes or no, RL, RM. And say you're there, so.
To kind of go off of what Mr. Elliott said, there's with them using the whole 37 acres as the density, they're essentially still getting RM with an RL designation because they're only developing 10 acres over the whole. Right. So I would be more in favor of the RL than the RM, and there's still that wiggle room with the projects to see what they're actually going to develop there.
This is a tough one.
It is.
I appreciate the idea Councilmember Elliott put forth and the comments that were made in response to that. I will support the RM designation. I don't believe that the Oddfellows are in it for the profit, so I don't think you're going to see 450 homes on the 10 acres. That doesn't jive with their mission, and it doesn't jive with what they need. So, and we do need more variation in our housing. So I think with careful planning and being neighborly, this project could produce some really good housing that would benefit a lot of people who normally would not be eligible to buy a house or to live in a house like that.
Is anyone ready to make a motion?
I will move that we, let's see. Approve annexation request before us with and conduct first reading of the ordinance. And that's
Those should be,
with
I'm
the
sorry, to interrupt,
residential.
but those should be two different motions. if you would.
Okay,
The first one would be the annexation itself.
I would move that we approve annexation request from the International Order of Oddfellows for the lots designated in the ordinance
With what zoning?
with the RM zoning.
So, oh, is there a second? So, David, you're looking, did you hear?
I did, but I was under the impression we were separating the annexation from the zoning.
We're separating the annexation and zoning from the first reading of ordinance 4909.
Okay, I understand. Okay, thank you.
Is there a second for Councilmember Goodlow's motion? Motion dies for lack of second. Is there another motion?
I move annexation of the parcels in front of us with the residential low zoning designation.
Second.
Motion and second for approval of the annexation with a residential low zoning designation. Further discussion. Mr. Miller.
I'll just speak to the this motion, and I agree with Councilmember Goodlow's assessment. This is a tough balancing act. I think we're kind of seeing two sides of the same coin, I guess. We're through our land development processes, we're trying to follow traditional zoning and land development patterns, and that is things like adopting zoning that is compatible with adjacent zoning for continuity and things like that. And that's that's the way communities have been developed in our country since zoning first existed. But we're also facing the reality that that type of zoning is not adequate going forward in terms of getting the kind of densities we need through new development, infill development. So we're kind of at a junction, I think, sort of nationally in terms of land use, and all communities around the country are going through this. I just feel like it's sort of like I wasn't prepared to support the higher density as sort of an experiment in this area. I think we need to really get our arms around what densification looks like before we start launching into individual outliers. So that's why I favor the RL. By my calculation, we could end up, or the Oddfellows could end up with upwards of 200 dwelling units over the 30 plus acres. That will make a significant impact. And I think Councilmember Wynn's earlier comment, the calculation basis, the density that could be realized on the 10 acres or so will be significant. And I think for that reason alone, I think the RL is the way I'd like to go on this.
Thank you. Is there any further comments? I'll just say I probably could have gone with the RM, but I think mitigating that is the density being spread over the 288 versus 80 is probably should meet the Oddfellows needs in terms of, I mean, it's higher density than 8 per acre for the 10 acres. So I'm hoping that is sufficient to get them what they need. So if there are no further comments, all in favor?
Aye.
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 I too will vote aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Counting 5 in favor and 1 opposed. Motion carries. Thank you all for coming.
There'd still be there.
One more. I'm sorry.
Ordinance number
4909.
4909.
Is there a second?
One will quick on that one. It does state on there residential medium zoning.
I think that could be handled through an amendment if there's a second.
I'll second
Oh,
that.
in the 409. Okay.
You seconded it.
So motion and second for first reading of ordinance 4909.
What section are we talking about?
Section 4.
Section 4, I would like to amend all references to zoning for the annex parcels to read residential low.
There's second for the amendment.
Second.
Motion and second to amend the main motion to change the RM to RL in section 4. So discussion. All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
2 will vote aye. Opposed? That motion carries. All in favor of the main motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Vote aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Okay, thank you.
Read the ordinance.
Oh, just read the ordinance. Sorry. Your stuff here.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Ellensburg, Washington, annexing parcels 744-134, 474134, 513634, 503634 to the City of Ellensburg, Washington, assigning residential low zoning classification, providing for the assumption of existing city indebtedness, and fixing a time when the same shall be effective.
Okay, thank you. Moving on. Let's see, this is a public hearing, legislative public hearing to adopt resolution 2023-2, amending the city's 6-year transportation improvement plan. for 2023-20 through 2028. So this public hearing is now open. I ask your cooperation in the following procedure. Everyone will be given an opportunity to be heard. The city clerk will be making a recording of the proceedings. I will first recognize requests to testify from anyone attending this hearing in person, followed by any persons attending remotely via Zoom. If you wish to participate virtually via Zoom, you must raise your virtual hand on the Zoom meeting screen or press *9 if you're connected by telephone only, and wait until I have recognized your request and you have been unmuted. When you are invited to speak, please begin by stating your name and address and indicate whether you are speaking for yourself individually or as a spokesperson for a certain group or both. Speak slowly and clearly. Only one person will be allowed to speak at a time. Any questions of staff are to be directed through council. So before we hear from the audience, is there a staff report to be presented?
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor and members of City Council. My name is Josh Mattson with the Ellensburg Public Works and Utilities Department. In June of last year, council approved our 2023 to 28 six-year transportation improvement plan. The resolution before you tonight is to amend that plan to reflect new grant funding and revise 2 projects on the plan. Amendments to this plan can be completed at any time and then submitted to the state. The first revision is for the Main Street Overlay Project to update the extent of this project on the list from 3rd Avenue to University Way with secured funds based on staff recently securing a Transportation Improvement Board grant for the project. The total project cost is $608,000, with the grant covering 65% of the project and a local match for the remaining funds. Design of the project will begin shortly with construction planned for this summer. The Canyon Road overlay portion of this transportation improvement plan project from Umptanum Road to Mountain View Avenue will be placed into a new project, number 64, planned for 2025. The second revision is for the new Finning Road Sidewalks project to update the extent of this project from 240 feet north of Vantage Highway to Radio Road to fill in an existing sidewalk gap with secured funds based on staff recently securing another Transportation Improvement Board grant for the project. The total project cost is about $2.1 million, with the grant covering, again, 65% of the project and local funds covering the balance. Design of this project will begin this year with construction plan for 2024. The Finning Road Sidewalks portion of this TIP project from Radio Road North to 14th Avenue will be placed into a new project, number 65 on the list, planned for completion after 2028. With that, staff recommends council adopt the resolution amending the 23 to 28 six-year transportation improvement plan. You'll find that on page 135 and 136 of your agenda packet. Staff also recommends council authorize the mayor and staff to execute any and all necessary grant associated paperwork for both of these projects.
Thank you. The floor is open to testimony from the public. Each person will have an opportunity to address the council for an initial period not to exceed 5 minutes. If more time is needed, it will be made available after everyone has had an opportunity to speak. Is there anyone? I'm seeing no one. There's one person in the audience. Would you like to, I think you're here for a different subject, aren't you? And 2 folks online, if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing no one, does the staff have anything to add?
Nothing to add.
And there's no audience on repetitive information. So council, do you have questions for the staff or public? Actually, I have a question. So just to clarify, are the sidewalks on Fenning on the west side only?
Both sides.
Both sides of the street?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
But
Any further questions?
No, I'd just like to make a comment. I'm excited about
let's hold that for just a minute. So the
Madam Mayor,
public testimony portion of the hearing is now closed. Council may now begin its discussion and deliberation. Go ahead and
I
discuss.
just want to say I'm very excited about the extra funds and being able to move some of these projects up. Appreciate all your hard work on that.
Ditto. Councilmember Elliott.
Madam Mayor, I move resolution two thousand twenty-three 3 and authorize the mayor and staff to execute.
It's 2023 dash 02.
Second.
Three was the next one. Okay, 2023-02.
Second.
Motion and second to adopt resolution 2023-02, amending the 2023 to 2028 six-year transportation plan. Is there further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Two will vote aye, opposed. Motion carries. That's a resolution, so we don't get to read it. Okay. So moving to 9A, page 140. This is second reading of ordinance 4906.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members, Terry Weiner, city attorney. At your December 19th, 2022 meeting, I presented ordinance 4906 for first reading. This ordinance is intended to give our staff and our law enforcement an additional tool in dealing with people who may not have been engaged in violations of the law necessarily. They may be violating our rules of conduct, mostly in our parks and our libraries. And it would allow staff then to, after attempts to have the person self-correct their behavior through education by staff, if that is not successful, then to exclude them for various periods of time from those facilities, depending on how many times they may have been excluded before. So a first-time offender could be excluded for up to 30 days. And then after that, it goes all the way up from 90 days to 1 year. At that meeting on December 19th, there were questions about what those rules of conduct are. I've attached those to the staff report. As you can see, there are rules of conduct that are department generated by both the library and the Parks Department. The Parks rules of conduct are mostly intended to govern the recreation programs, but there's also the city code, which is also included in the report, which also addresses conduct in the city parks. So the intent would be that if this ordinance is adopted by council tonight, that staff would then look at those rules in the context of this ordinance and probably change some of those provisions to try to harmonize them. They would have to be harmonized with the ordinance in terms of what the result of behavior that violates the rules results in terms of exclusion periods. But this is something that staff has worked on for quite some time and developed in conjunction with input from the public as well. And also with the Parks and Recs Commission's review. So we would ask the council conduct second reading and adoption of the ordinance, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for the city attorney? Okay, we have a motion.
We might have somebody.
Oh, is there? Would you like to speak on this one? Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members of council, thank you. Tyrell Nielsen, 1200 East Craig. I live on Reed Park. I want to speak in support of ordinance 4906. Part of that comes from my background that I'll fill in a little bit. I have worked in law enforcement for 9 years. Over 3 years of that was for a municipal agency on the west side where I actively used
a city code to issue trespass admonishments and enforce those as well. I currently live locally on Reed Park and work for the Kittitas County Sheriff's Office. My family's lived on Reed Park since 1945, and I've been a property owner on the park since 2020. Portions of the, is there a time frame? Sorry.
It's
I
actually
can't.
three-
Oh, okay. I
It
see
should be
now.
It
3
should be
minutes.
Got
3
it. Perfect.
minutes.
Thank you.
We're going to cut you off at 2 minutes because
Okay, it should be 3 minutes. Got it. I'll try to keep it under so you don't have to. Professionally, I teach de-escalation at the state level as well to teach others to instruct it. So I teach instructors to teach de-escalation, and I absolutely am in support of the ordinance. I think it's a tool that the City of Ellensburg Police Department truly need. I was surprised when I moved along the park and realized that they didn't have that authority. It was fairly frustrating to be a resident along the park and know that there are issues that could be easily corrected with trespass authority when it didn't exist. And so I'm in absolute support of it. The portion of it that I want to speak to specifically, there's 3 things. I would ask if possible to remove the explicit structure of the length of exclusion. While I absolutely agree that prioritizing education, de-escalation, and pushing towards voluntary compliances should always be the immediate goal, there may be times when longer trespass admonishments are necessary. And I believe that at times law enforcement on scene should have the discretion to issue a longer trespass admonishment. And that may potentially take place on page 144 towards the bottom, underneath 5.72.030. It says due to illegal conduct, I would ask that the statement or the present danger to persons or others. I believe that statement alone would open this up a little bit and allow a little bit more discretion for when longer trespass admonishments can be issued. The other portion of it that I think would serve law enforcement and the community slightly better would be to remove the specific verbiage where only that property, and I believe that should always be the first attempt, is to exclude them from that specific property. But again, there may be times when excluding them from more than just that single property would be useful for not only the community, but the authority of law enforcement. In closing, I fully believe that the City of Ellensburg Police Department needs this ordinance to truly serve and protect the community. And I thank you for bringing it up.
thank you for your comments. Is there anyone online who would like to speak to the issue? Seeing no hands raised. Council, do you have any questions for the city attorney? Any motions?
I think I do have a question. I'm a little confused. With section A, 5.72.030. There was comment about a longer exclusion. And I don't see where it says what the.
At the very bottom of A, it says if the conduct meets the standard in that subsection, the warning may exclude the person for a period of up to 1 year.
Oh, okay. I see. Fine, thank you.
So there was also an option, as I recall, to exclude from more than one park if the
That's at the end of, in that,
was bad enough, if the conduct was bad enough.
it's at the end of, also in 030 on page 145 in C, where it limits it to the one particular area. The last sentence says, notwithstanding the foregoing, conduct included in subsection A, which we just discussed above, may result in exclusion from more than one place. So if it meets the standard in A, then a person could be excluded from more than just the single side of the property.
And the standard was illegal or presents a danger.
Yeah, or is issued due to dangerous or unsafe conduct.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I would move second reading of ordinance 4906.
I second that, including adoption, yes.
Intend adoption.
Oh, yes, I thought that was why we were reading it again.
Um, Motion and second to approve second reading and adoption of ordinance 4906. In discussion?
I just note on 030, the last sentence in C, there appears there's a Scrivener error where we're missing the word one, more than, from more than place. It should read more than one place, I assume. On page 145.
We'll make that correction. Thank you.
Sure.
Um, I think I appreciate Mr. Nielsen's the comments, but I think let's try this as is and I think there's enough language in here that if it's appropriate, we can exclude for longer and for more than one place. And if not, we'll find out and change it. So, is there any further comments? All in favor?
So
I'll
roll
take
call.
a roll.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Beauchamp,
Yes.
Elliott,
Yes.
Goodlow,
Yes.
David Miller,
Aye.
Lynn,
Yes.
Lowquist.
Aye.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Ellensburg, Washington relating to use of city property and adding a new chapter 5.72 exclusion and trespass from city property to the Ellensburg City Code.
Thank you. Next item is ordinance 4907, second reading, update of the sign code. Mr. Ailing.
Evening, Madam Mayor, members of council, Jamie Ailing with Community Development. And what we have before you tonight in called December 19th, 2022 meeting, I presented the ordinance 4907 for first reading, which was amendments to our sign code, making it content neutral and removing some definitions, adding a section about heights and adding a reference with legislative section to this code among some minor clerical changes to the code. But I do want to point out, basically 4907 before you tonight is very similar, but we had to provide on the dais tonight in reading in the transfer from first reading to second reading, did catch an error starting on page 158 of your original packet. In the definitions section, in the first reading, we had added the definition of freeway oriented sign. And somehow that got missed being transferred on to second reading. So we provided an updated version of your packet on the dais that includes that definition, a freeway oriented sign, a sign within 1,000 feet of a freeway right away that has its sign face parallel to, perpendicular to, or angled toward, or otherwise readable from the freeway right of way. That's important in referring to the next section on page 163 of your packet, where it talks about on-premise signs. In this second reading, we are eliminating in section, so 3.12240, section B. The statement said notwithstanding the foregoing, or it says all on-premise signs shall adhere to the following conditions, and then B is notwithstanding the foregoing, the maximum height for all on-premise freeway-oriented signs in the CH zone shall be 100 feet. So that's the importance of needing to add the definition of freeway-oriented signs. And then we're going to eliminate the statement, such signs shall require a conditional use permit in accordance with the procedures of 15-250-040. Those provisions don't necessarily fit very well for signs. And by putting those guardrails on in this ordinance of defining what a freeway sign is, that provides us better definition as to why we can allow the 100-foot where we can. And then the last change that came up in your newest packet on your dais is on page 166, it's section 3.12300 E, under other signs. There was also a reference about businesses in multiple occupancy buildings with how many signs they can have. It says businesses in the CH zone shall be allowed one additional freestanding sign if the property has a minimum of 180 square feet of frontage on a single street and is a minimum of 1 acre in area. We'd like to end with a period right there and not go on to make it more confusing, wondering how many signs you can actually have. It made it, when you added and another freestanding sign, if the business successfully obtains a conditional use permit from Planning Commission for construction of freeway oriented sign. Because we're not doing a conditional use permit for that, it got confusing, so we were ending that there. Other than that, the ordinance is the same as the first reading, and I would request that council conduct second reading with those amendments of ordinance 4907.
Council?
Madam Mayor, I move second reading and adoption of the amended ordinance 4907.
Second.
Motion and second for second reading and adoption of ordinance 4907 as amended. I thought I was missing that. I know I saw it
Aren't
the
we all?
first time. Thank you. So
Question?
question. Calling for the question?
No, I have a question for
Have a
staff.
question? Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Jamie, I'm on the, looking at section 320, the pre-existing signs, and it looks like we're pretty well covered. I do recall though, in conversations that go back many years at planning commission level, that there was sort of an attempt by individuals or businesses that owned existing signs to protect those. In other words, they sort of were grandfathered, and I see the language here that exempts prior or pre-existing signs. I know of a couple in town that where the sign is gone, but the structure exists, hasn't been removed, and I think for the reason I mentioned. Do you see this creating an opportunity for those existing signs to be, if they're going to either be upgraded or restored, they would have to meet the current code, or is there some loophole where an old existing sign could be maintained in its current configuration indefinitely?
That is a good question. I think there's provisions where when the businesses move out and they're no longer, they sit vacant for a period of time, that's when that provision kicks in, that needs to be removed, including structure. So that would be more of a code enforcement type avenue we need to approach when those are pointed out to us. I don't think it sets it up for that pre-existing situation to occur in the way that this is worded. It's more of a kicks it to code enforcement, and we would receive a complaint and then act on that. If it's more vacant for, and I've forgotten the number of days, but it's a significant amount of time once they move out. And that we run into that on occasion when business owners leave, but it's left with the landowner, and then it's kind of a who does what, as the business that went maybe bankrupt or something, they don't want to come in.
I can think of 2 or 3 signs, both downtown and out on, Canyon Road, that are substantial steel structures, and they've been left, they're probably 50 years old or older. And, the signs are long gone and the supports are still there, but they had some perceived value to the property owner. And I don't know if that's in fact the case, but I was just curious of how you saw that. Thank you.
Thank you.
No further questions or discussion. All in favor of
Do a roll.
no, Beth will
Yeah,
take the
two
roll.
more. Beauchamp,
Yes.
Elliott,
Yes.
Yes.
Goodloe, David Miller,
Aye.
Wynn,
Yes.
Lilquist.
Aye.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Ellensburg, Washington relating to signs, amending chapter 3.12 sign code and amending sections as listed, and adding a new section entitled 3.12.030 legislative findings to the Ellensburg City Code.
Thank you. Next up is ordinance 4908, second reading, approving of the rezone request by Mr. Jason Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council, Jamie Ailing, Community Development. And before you is the second reading of I can't talk, sorry. The second reading of ordinance 4908. This is a rezone request from Jason Smith to rezone property parcel number 126-233 on 703 East Helen Avenue to go from residential suburban to residential medium. The first reading and public hearing occurred on December 19th, 2022, and was recommended to move forward to this meeting for second reading. There have been no changes to the ordinance from first reading to second, and staff would request that you conduct second reading of ordinance 4908.
Okay, thank you. Council, are there any questions? Motion?
Madam Mayor, I move second reading adoption of ordinance 4908.
Second.
Motion and second for second reading and adoption of ordinance 4908. Is there discussion?
Boshaw,
Yes.
Elliott,
Yes.
Goodlow,
Yes.
David Miller,
Step away. Okay.
Wynn,
Yes.
Lookworth.
Yes.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Ellensburg, Washington relating to zoning and amending Title 15 of the Ellensburg City Code by changing the zoning classification of certain property within the City of Ellensburg from residential suburban RS to residential medium RM.
Thank you. We are at the manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hetty Baron Sternaway, your city manager. On the manager's report, just a notification of a natural gas purchase. And also, thank you for passing the card for Representative Schreier and Representative Schreier advocated for funding for our solar and grid modernization project. We received 1.5 million of federal funding. And so we will be scaling that project and doing some external outreach, but again, appreciate the dollars that are coming into our community to enhance our services. And that's all I guess I do have one other item. We did reach out to the county commissioners to schedule a joint study session. The date we came up with in January, our consultants aren't available for that. So Cindy will be reaching out again to the Board of County Commission staff to see if we can find some alternate dates in late January, early February for a joint meeting. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Elliott.
So no meetings the last couple of weeks.
Could you move into the microphone?
Nothing to report.
I think that's correct. Well, I hope you found your time at this shelter rewarding.
I have no meetings the last couple of weeks either, but I do have one update. At the last council meeting, it was reported that the community grants subcommittee, one of our grantees, closed down. So we had some additional funding that could be awarded. So we have met over the holidays and would bring a recommendation to city council to allocate the funding that we had, $2,500 to the Northwest Expressive Arts Response organization.
Okay, and you want to make that a motion or?
Yeah, the city attorney said if you wanted to do a motion right now during this item, then we can execute the
Okay.
paperwork for that.
Then I will make a motion that we award the $2,500 to Northwest Expressive Arts Response Organization.
A second.
Motion and seconds to award the extra $2,500 from the Community Grants Fund to Northwest Expressive Arts Response. Further discussion? That was the one that didn't receive anything because they asked for way too much. So, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Anything else, Nancy? Sarah? I have nothing to report.
Most of my meetings are coming up this week or next. I did have the Law and Justice meeting, and I was volunteered as the new chair, which I accepted. So I will be the new chair of that starting this month. Other than that, just thank you to the one lonely community member that stuck around at the very end of our session here.
We're not too late. Councilmember Miller.
No report.
I attended a broadband action team meeting with the county today. They are trying to rally letters of support, or what they're calling testimonials, for in support of a grant application, which is due January 17th. We haven't written that letter of support for you all to see, but if you would grant me signing authority, the staff will, I'm sure, write an excellent letter that you would all support.
So moved.
Motion, or just it can be consensus? All good.
It's good for me.
We'll do that. I just wanted to say a big thank you to staff for working over the holidays and clearing our roads and keeping the lights on and doing all of that stuff. And I met with the local reporter, Rodney Harwood, today, and I just started my New Year's reflections of how much we accomplished last year together. We had a lot of accomplishments, and we've made solid progress to put us in a good position for 2023. And we've really stuck to our strategic vision, our 5 pillars of housing and economic development, and the safe, inclusive community, and our energy policy and infrastructure, and just kind of making that list in preparation for that meeting. It was a very long list of accomplishments in 2022 and a very long list of things to do in 2023. So we need to stay focused and get that stuff done. So I appreciate all of you on the council, and really appreciate everyone on staff for getting us where we are. So with that, we are adjourned. Great.
Thank you, everyone.